Today we have with us Eeman Masood, an artist based in Canada. Her work explores delicate watercolor and gouache paintings. She often explores themes of loss and nostalgia. We're so glad to have you with us. First, can we chat a little bit about the thematic focus of your work? How did you come to this imagery?
Hi, so thank you so much for inviting me. And I think that it has been quite a journey, especially in the past few years. My work has changed a lot in the past couple of years, especially after coming here to Canada. So I'm originally from Pakistan, from Lahore, and it's my work started over there, and then eventually it developed. So I was initially working with the themes of hope and rebirth and finding like strength. And so
Yeah.
basically a couple years ago in around like 2020, like when COVID hit and everything shut down, that was like the main turning point for my work. I think so, because I used to like I couldn't like go out, and it was the time when I was like in my fourth year of my bachelor's, and there was like a lot of uncertainty. So I remember I used to go to my rooftop all the time, and I would like sit there and just um look outside at the trees and the sky, and I got really interested in like looking at and experiencing the sunsets and the sunrises. So in the starting it was just like I would just like observe it, but then
Yeah.
eventually I remember I just at one point I just even deleted social media because it was just very like it was just inducing a lot of anxiety. So I remember like in that solitude time I started feeling a lot of hope once again. And when I was like looking at nature, I started observing all the little things in it that I never really observed before, like to this extent. For example, like a flower withers and then it blooms again, the sun rises, sets and then rises again, and even like the transitions in color. And I also realized that like even if you look at night, which is associated with darkness, it is also very richly colored,
Yeah.
and there is like just a lot of beauty about it. So I think that was the like major turning point in my work. And before that, a lot of my paintings were I use watercolors mostly, and a lot of
Yeah.
my paintings used to be very dark, and like I would use a lot of shades of blue, and they weren't vibrant, but at that time those colors like I really resonated with them. So, but then eventually after all of this experience, I remember like once COVID almost like all the lockdown and everything like it was lifted. I remember like I did this show where I introduced like colors like pink and like the fog
Yeah.
colors and like the transitions in sky in my work. And I think that was the time, like it was because I saw a lot of hope, like I felt a lot of hope within myself, and I started feeling better. I think those colors naturally started coming into my work.
Yeah.
So from there, like I think all of even till today, like all of the paintings that I do, mostly the color transitions are inspired by the transitions in nature, like the
Yeah.
sky color changing or the seasonal changes. So so yeah, definitely nature and my surrounding has had like a very profound impact on my imagery right now. And if I talk about imagery only, so in my current work, which is like now in my MFA, I'm doing a lot of, I start experimenting with a lot of animations and uh, like elements like peacock, they've like actually appeared again in my animation as well. And it used to be a big part of my paintings because peacocks for me, or generally, like they are a symbol of strength
Yeah.
and confidence. Uh, and in some cultures, they're also believed to be like associated with heaven. So in these idealistic landscapes that I was creating, like for the reason for me to add the peacock was to also like insinuate like that hope again. So yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. In your artist statement, you also talk about how like you blend personal memories with like mythical kind of figures.
Yeah.
So I guess like the peacock is an expression of that. Can you talk a little bit about like other ways that you do that, and how do personal like memories surface in your work?
Yeah. So I think so that specific part in my bio related to some of my previous work, which is still like connected to me. And that was mostly also about, so in around 2022 and 2021, like majority of my paintings that were like I would have like landscapes of like sea and flowers, and there used to be a lot of pearls in it which would look like pearls, or that was actually a necklace, a pearl necklace that I used in a very different way, that it didn't look like a necklace, it would look like a glowing dot or something, like right in the start. So that was actually the time where my work was also deeply inspired by nostalgia, and I had lost some very close people to me in my family, and I was grieving their loss, but I also wanted to honor their memory in like in a hopeful way. And that's actually like right that time before COVID, so like it kind of transitioned into that work later on. But in the starting, so there used to be like these marigold flowers in my
Yeah.
paintings, and I would like paint them a lot. So that flower used to be my grandmother's favorite flower, and then also a necklace that she once gave to me. So those, like when I was thinking about these things, that like how like people are not there anymore, but their memories are, and
Yeah.
it's something that like just stays with you. And I eventually started seeing a lot of hope in it, that if they were even here, like I would have to like uh move on with my life, but with a lot of hope and the things that I've actually learned from them. So I used those things that were like very close to me, so
Yeah.
they would appear in my paintings. And a lot of times in my paintings from a couple years ago, there were like you'd see a lot of marigold, like very delicate flowers, and they would be like
Mm-hmm.
fading away in some places, and they would be glowing in some places.
Yeah.
So for me, that was a way of representing like a memory and tying my personal experiences in my landscapes. And yeah, and at that time, even the color palette of my work was like very dark for that series. So yeah, and then it changed
Yeah.
eventually as I grew with time.
That makes a lot of sense. I think like because you talked about marigolds and like the delicacy, I also noticed that you studied miniature painting in college.
Yeah.
So how does that and the delicacy that you probably had to do there
Yeah.
influence the work that you do right now, because it's quite different.
Yeah. Yeah, so in my bachelor's, I graduated in traditional miniature painting, and even over there, like in the first 2 years, like you are mostly like in the first year, especially when you go into the miniature block, you are supposed to really like learn the traditional techniques and like the old masters techniques. And even though later on you don't do that, but you're supposed to actually learn and go through that process. So which I'm kind of very like grateful as well to have that experience, because that time in my life taught me a lot as well. So we would so even learn to make our own paint brushes, we learn to make our
Mm.
own paints and even our own paper, and even like the glue that binds the paper, it's made by, it's called gum arabic. So those were like very interesting experiences in my life. So we used to if talking about the traditional miniature painting, like there was a time that we had to copy some older masters work just for like to like practice and just to like improve our skills. And there used to be a lot of different kinds of exercises which I would love to share. Like there used to be this one thing where you would like sharpen your pencil to the point that it's like only lead, and like any hardly any wood is visible, and you use like a sandpaper to like really like make it like exactly like a needle. It was like as sharp as a needle. And then you would have to like fill the boxes on the paper in like a darker tone, and then you would actually create a grayscale. So it would be like starting from a really dark tone going to a really light tone.
Yeah.
But and that was very hard to do it with like a pen, like a needle kind of lead. But that was like one of the exercises to learn also the like how much pressure you have to apply in order to get like certain lines, because it's very delicate, like you
Yeah.
said, like the work. So every breath like literally mattered. So you
Yeah.
would like inhale and then like start a line and then exhale. And if I like talk to anyone in between, like the work would get ruined, because like it was like that precision at that level that you would just not be able to like even talk to other
Yeah.
people. And it was really connected to your breath, which I think all of those experiences, like even though I don't like now, like my work has evolved into the contemporary miniature or like just like contemporary art, but those things have like those exercises in that time has taught me a lot. Like you get so aware of your surroundings and like the weight of the pencil, the pressure of the hand, and your breath and how it's like linked to your work. So so yeah, we did like I did go through all of that, and then eventually the work eventually then you had to develop your own work, and then
Yeah.
it was like on you that if you want to use those techniques as like the traditional miniature, or if you want to like push through them. But I think that a lot of artists, like especially like Shazia Sikandar, they have like already carved the way for like more like younger artists to actually by actually breaking the boundaries of those traditional miniature and like making it large scale or adding moving image to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that like gave me a lot of inspiration as well, and gave me that push to like continue to like explore it in my own
Uh-huh.
way.
That
So
makes
yeah.
sense. Yeah. I think another like aspect of your work that was unique was like the way you depict, the way you play with like perspective. So can you talk about how these landscapes are sort of flat but also three-dimensional at the same time, and like how
Yeah.
did you get to that?
Yeah, actually, in this writing, like I was like never, like I never really like pre-planned every single thing to the precision, because whenever like in this writing I would used to do that, oh, I have this set thing in my mind and I want to make something exactly like that. It would like hardly ever turn out the way that I wanted it to be. So then I later on realized that it's better to have an idea, but then just let the let the paints and let the painting guide you for once, and not constantly directing the painting. So for my landscapes, they are the mythical landscapes, like those places. It's so for me, creating those landscapes was also like one way of like it was an escape for me as well from
Yeah.
the harsh realities of what's going around in the world. And I didn't used to like I hardly use any, like I don't really do a lot of photography just for my painting. Like I don't really paint from like pictures or references. It's mostly like things that I've experienced or seen, or like the colors, but they're like mostly in my mind that I just try to create these three-dimensional like layers, and making these landscapes in watercolors on paper.
Hmm.
So I think that I also got really interested in exploring the nature of watercolor, that in my paintings, if
Yeah.
you would see that sometimes sometimes the like some areas of it's very translucent, and you can see the
Yeah.
watercolor feel of it, like how water is drying on the paper. But on the other hand, you would also see like peacocks or like leaves that are like very highly detailed. So I really started enjoying this comparison, like this side by side shift of like having like a very loose watercolor, and then also like some very carefully, precisely
Yeah.
painted stuff. So eventually, like those landscapes, I would say that they started to develop as well. If talking about my work, that was mostly linked to nostalgia and the marigold flowers. At that time, I used to paint like a lot of seascapes, and it would look like a sea or like an underwater ocean, or like where the sun was also not really visible. But then eventually, I think that especially in my like very recent work, it's been like it's kind of an abstract, I guess, like a setting of a landscape, because you would a lot of my compositions were centralized in the for
Yeah,
like they were like centralized, and there would be like this a lot of layers on the side, or like the trees and like the leaves surrounding them. But I think those are like spaces, I would say, like within me, that I've tried to translate on paper. And a lot of times they change when I'm like making, because it's also a very long process of
yeah,
making those paintings. So I think that once my painting gets completed, it's not just like a couple days of work, it's like months of emotions, and then all the ups and downs of my
definitely.
life, and like everything that goes into it. So yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Um, Also, you talked about how, sometimes you leave the watercolor loose, and like in other places
Yeah.
you like it more detailed. Like, can you elaborate a little on the process of working with these mediums that are quite fast in nature but still, doing that much
Yeah.
detail?
Yeah. So I think that that now I've kind of like figured out this balance, especially with watercolors. But initially, but I think as I continue to like keep changing things, there are like always things that are going to happen that are just not in my control, and I'll have to like learn to like deal with them. But so we started with gouache, and like as like when I like did the traditional miniature painting and all. But then later on, I just started using more, and even at that time, we used to make our own gouache. Like we would make this white pigment that is called like a safeda, and you make that after by like purifying the impurities of like by removing the impurities of poster paint. And it's like a long process, and at the end you're left with this white powdered pigment which is very purified, and you add some gum arabic to it, and you mix it. And in every like that's how we used to do it. But there's of course an even more organic way of doing it. But for us, like if you would put some watercolor in, like we would use like the seashells to
Yeah,
actually make to mix paint. So like if you would if there's like red watercolor in it, and if you
yeah,
add like even a drop of that white paint, it turns opaque and it turns into gouache. So that was like that learning that I don't do it exactly like that anymore, but even like just using a bit of that pigment and mixing it, like it gives me like this opportunity to actually make opaque watercolors, uh, because in generally like the watercolors are very translucent. Another thing about my process is, which is very important for me, is like the layers that it's
yeah,
been worked in. Like I have a lot of layers in my work. So I usually start with I don't really start by drawing anything on the paper. So because even if I like draw something, my base washes are like very intense colors, so everything gets washed out. So I would usually start with like layering and like some techniques like wet on wet, where you just like wet the paper and then you add diluted uh, paint on it, and then eventually so going from like a lighter shade mostly, and then going towards the darker shades. And I think that for me, actually starting a new artwork is like the most like hard part of like working, and like the most challenging part as well, because and that part actually gives me a lot more stress than any other part, because like just starting something, and then there comes a point where there are like just so many colors on my paper, and I'm just waiting for like a lot of times I want some layers to dry completely before I add another layer, or a lot of times I want them to be like 60% dry,
yeah,
and then I add another color. So I think there is just always like this balance, which like I guess I've kind of figured out for my own self, at least through a lot of like practice with it, about like how wet I want the layer to be. And because if it's too wet and you add another color, it will just get mixed, or if it's too dry and you add another color, it will leave a very like weird outline around it. So so yeah, it's a very long process for me as well, and a lot of times it takes me like 4 to 6 hours to just do that base
yeah,
painting wash. And um after that is done, a lot of times it does happen that I don't eventually like how it's looking. So a lot of times I would just start over, or a lot of times I would just like start working on it, and eventually it does get better. So so yeah, like that's the nature of watercolors, I guess. And then mostly, so I always use the translucent and loose watercolors for my bases, because I think for my base washes, because I think they allow for like a lot of transparency, and you can like create a lot of depth on it. And towards the end, I do end up adding a lot of like
Yeah.
darker shades of watercolor as well, but not really in the start, because there's no going back. Like you can't paint over it. So yeah, and then after that is done, so there's also another important technique that we learned in traditional miniature, which I use it in my own way. It's called burnishing the paper. So you have like a burnisher, or it's like an old shell, and it's also called a burnisher, which you actually take, and you have to like just rub it on the paper. It's quite an arm workout, but like you have to rub it on the paper for so long, like to cover the whole paper,
Mm-hmm.
and it actually flattens out all the grains in the paper. So then your brush slides very easily. And I think that these little things I would have not really cared much about if I was doing an oil painting, or if I was working on a canvas. But if like when I work in such minute detail, where if I'm like painting the glow part, like especially the glowing parts in my
Yeah.
painting, those are like done by like a very small brush and on like the final like layer. And that brush, a lot of times it's just equal, like it's just around like a strand of hair, or like two strands of hair. It's just very extremely thin. So like I would like do a lot of layers of it, especially in those glowing parts. And at that time, it really feels, if the paper has a lot of grains
Yeah.
and the brush is that small, you would actually feel it like not going that way. So then like burnishing the paper at some point. And but I think that all of this process, like it makes you really aware of these little details of like the like how the brush is sliding on the paper, and how your breath is connected to it, which I find very therapeutic as well.
It sounds really interesting. Um,
Yeah.
just to move away from like your process a little bit, because you talked about a lot. It does seem very interesting.
Yeah.
You the titles of your paintings are like quite like literal but they're
Yeah.
poetic at the same time. How do you
Yeah.
come up with them?
Yeah, so I think I take a long time to title my paintings, and there was a point when I used to think that I would just leave it untitled, but I never want to leave the paintings untitled. Now, I also don't want, like, whenever I'm thinking about a title, I also don't, at least for now, don't want it to be like very direct or like a specific thing, because I think that if even like someone else, when they look at the work or they read the title, like that title really frames the
Yeah,
context, I guess,
definitely.
for like the painting. And if you're like if for me personally, only like if I just write like exact one thing that it is about, then it doesn't let even the other person, I guess, to like go like more deeper into it and actually find their own meaning,
Yeah,
if the title is telling them that, oh, you have to think about only
yeah, if it's
this.
that literal.
So um for me personally, and my titles, so I also like used to like I listen to a lot of poetry, like some old poets like by Rumi, and also even like Rabindranath Tagore. Like a lot of times I would really like just some old texts and all. I just like the depth of those poetries, and even like, which is very disconnected to poetry, but like I even really like Van Gogh's writings. Like I read the book about Van Gogh's letters to his brother. So all of them, like they describe very deep feelings of like a connection of human self with the nature, or like with its surrounding and your solitude. And like a lot of times it's reflection, like your inward reflection, or like looking inside of yourself. So after listening to all of those things, and just like feeling like being connected to your own self, I think um that really inspires me to a lot of times write those titles. And I used to actually write some poetry as well, which I like never really showed anyone. So that's like this like a hidden thing that I sometimes used to do. So now I've like recently started to a lot of times taking like a couple phrases from my own poetry and then translating them into English and then putting them as titles to my work.
Oh, that's lovely. It always helps to have poetry that you don't
Yeah,
show people. I think everyone can
yeah.
relate to that. Uh, I wanted to talk also about your inspiration. So you mentioned poets that you're inspired by. What are artists whose work that you look to, or like periods
So
of time? Yeah,
yeah, so there are like many artists, and especially now, even like right now, I'm in my master's, and I'm actually like more very more aware about this because in my recent research as well, there's been a lot of artists that have inspired me, especially like right now.
yeah,
I have transitioned, like I'm transitioning from my painting medium to also like the moving image and the animation. So all of my recent work is the hand painted animations that I've been doing. So even like in that transition, so one of the artists whose journey that has like inspired me, the one that I just mentioned earlier, is like Shazia Sikandar, who
yeah,
graduated from Lahore, but she's an Pakistani American artist now, and she's doing amazing work. And her journey has been really inspiring for me, also because I could relate to her a lot more in terms of like coming from like a miniature background and
yeah,
then coming to this part of the world. But I think she's already paved the way for a lot of younger artists like me to like actually like to help us actually break free from all of those like traditions and just like make work freely.
yeah,
So yeah, so she for sure. And then another artist in the especially in the moving image context is Kelly Richardson, who I met like I'm really grateful to have been, like met her in University of Victoria where I'm doing my MFA. And we've had like a lot of meetings, and she's also like my I'm very fortunate to have her as my supervisor as well. So we have been through like that like she's seen that journey of me like from starting to get into the moving image
yeah,
until now, until I've created some work. So about her work especially, it's like also not only just the conceptual part of it, which is very strong, and she's done amazing work for the environment and for the climate and a lot of things that we like need a lot of awareness for like right now, like the effects of all the climate change and all of the things that's like causing a lot of like damage to our to the nature around us. And so her work is not only like that like meaningful in that, but along with that just her technique about like just the precision in which she does her moving image work, like where every single thing, like there was this work of her which had like thousands of small crystals, and there is a very deeper meaning to that work as well. It's called Pillars of Torn, and I don't think I'll ever do justice if I like talk about it. So it's better to like read, like whoever is like is interested to read about that. But like how every single thing was like very precisely done and very precisely like thought of,
yeah,
and not just like they are like hauntingly beautiful, like the animations, and not just like even looking at it or the precision, but like the context behind them and the meaning. It's just like it's very strong, and definitely she's been like one of my inspirations for a really long time now.
yeah,
And yeah, and then there are some other artists as well whose like work in the immersive so there's this collective, like it's a team of artists, it's called Team Lab, and then there is another one, it's called Marshmallow Laser Feast. So it's a collective name, and but they make these huge installations of like which are mostly for like nature. So for example, like a whole like zoomed in version of like this tree root where you get this immersive experience that you're standing there and you can actually see that forest come alive,
yeah,
which was like very moving for me. So yeah, I think um yeah, like mostly like these are the people who've like really influenced me in my current research. So so yeah, yeah.
That
And then
sounds
other than
lovely.
that, like the writers and the poets and all of those.
Hmm.
So I think it's also like it's not like direct inspiration from just like one person's work, or like it's not like that it is like directly like influenced my one work. It's mostly like different aspects of different artists,
Yeah,
like like the technical part of some, or like the journey, or like someone's feeling. Like it's just like different things that have inspired me, or they have all contributed in shaping,
definitely.
like, yeah.
And you mentioned that you're currently working on moving images and like animating in your MFA.
Hmm.
So, like, can you explain a little bit about
Yeah.
that process?
Yeah, for sure. I would actually love to share that because my recent work has been, so it is about this. My current work is about, which I will like once it's done, I'll like obviously like post about it as well really soon. But it has this banyan tree in the center, which in like which I think in India it's called like Bargat ka
Huh.
tree, but yeah, so that tree is also like it's very like common to like South Asia, like India, Pakistan, and like that area. So when I like went back home recently in the summers, I went to visit this tree near my house, which I used to like hear a lot of stories about growing up, that oh, there's this thousands or hundreds of years old tree. So when I went there, I was like really shocked to see like the very poor condition of
Yeah,
that tree, because people around it, which I like thought that like they don't really realize like, and they don't even like know anymore how to care for that. So and it they are known for their huge shades. So the people underneath, the people who were like running their shops underneath that tree, they were like that, just because of that shade or the generosity of that tree, they were able to run their shops. And in reality, like that tree was not being taken care of anymore, like to that extent, where like how it was, like how it used to be. And I even saw like this street lamp that was like attached to the tree with some advertisements like plastered over it. And
yeah,
but I still saw animals sleeping underneath, and the tree was still continuing to provide for the people. And that feeling stayed with me for a very long time. I went to like this was also like part of my research trip as well, because I went to other reservation places and where the same tree, like another one of that, was like really preserved. When I came back here, I realized that over here, like a lot of work has been actively done to protect the environment, and I'm pretty sure it's also being done in Pakistan. But I was very like moved by seeing, by experiencing the state of that tree. So my work, my animation work, like originated from that, like my recent one, and I was also inspired by like my current work also talks
yeah,
about like there are many layers to it. So
yeah,
I think it has a cultural layer, it also has a spiritual layer to it as well. And it mostly talks about also like when, like in the older times, underneath that tree there used to be a lot of gatherings, and that
yeah,
tree has turned up like multiple times in the traditional miniature paintings that are like now in the museums. Like that tree has been a part of conversation, like a part of those paintings and those conversations since a very long time. And it was like a lot of wisdom was used to be like shared underneath that tree. And those trees actually go up to like live like up to like thousands of
yeah.
years. So now they are like one of the endangered species, I got to know, especially as well, like back home, which was really alarming because and and I also wanted to add that my work also talks about like this term. It's called generational amnesia. So it's like how with generations and as time passed, like people don't know anymore how to care for it,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
there's this lack of knowledge and this
yeah,
gap of knowledge. So through this work, I'm trying to highlight that part as well, and that urgency to actually like take care of it before everything is gone. And already, I think there is so much work, so much damage done to the world around us that is irreversible. And and through my work, it's also not just about this one literal tree, but it speaks to the overall feeling that tree, even if you, it's not about just losing
yeah,
that one tree, it's about losing losing all of those years, all of that wisdom, all of that information as well, and we cannot afford to keep doing that. So my current work actually, my animation, which is it's hand painted, and it took me quite like 8 9 months. I've been working on it. Um, it's also for my final project. Um, and actually, like a friend of mine who has actually like his name is Mujib, and he's helping me compose the music for that animation, and we have added flute into it and the
Oh,
instrument of santoor into it, so it's like a very new dimension that the work is going. And yeah, it's and my videos actually they expand the conversations from my paintings,
yeah.
so it's an expansion of that now.
That's really beautiful. I can't wait to see it. What have you also, just like to wrap this up, been paying attention to in like contemporary art? What are conversations or ideas that inspire you a lot? Except, the ones you
Um,
already talked about.
yeah, I mean, just like in contemporary art,
Yeah.
like the ideas, or can you like explain a little bit more about the question?
Just like what, who are like artists or movements or like themes in contemporary art that you've been paying attention to, maybe, or are inspired by?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of it is kind of similar to the artists that I mentioned, because they're like that, all of that is like part of my current research.
Yeah.
But also, I think that I would actually, even like when I was talking about Shazia Sikandar's
Yeah.
work, like I've been seeing her recent sculptural work, and the kind of like the kind of questions that it raises, and
Mm-hmm.
like how amazing that work is. And I was like really interested in seeing that how, like from painting, and like with time, and with
Yeah.
as you evolve and your work evolve, like how far can you even take your, like can you take your work like from paintings to like moving image to sculptures.
Yeah.
And actually seeing this diversity in like in a lot of artists work recently, like if I really think about it, I think I do want to experiment with something that I've like not done before, like maybe sculpture, or like I really miss canvas, like painting on canvas, which it's been quite a while that I've done that. So I think some of the things around that,
Yeah.
but also I think I do want to actually like expand my this moving image direction, and actually like go on to make more immersive environments to
Yeah.
consume the work as well, like 3 channel projections, or just like an extension of this. But I'm also realizing that that will take a lot of time, so
Mm-hmm.
I think right now I'm focused on just like finding a balance, I guess, between all of these aspects of my life.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That was it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was really, I really enjoyed talking to you
Me
about
too.
it, and
Yeah.
thank